The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 in the morning, just like it did every single day. Rita's hand shot out from under the thin blanket, slapping the button to make it stop. She lay there for a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a bird with broken wings. How fitting, she thought. Her studio apartment wasn't much to look at. You could see everything from the bed, the tiny kitchen with its 2 burners, the bathroom door that didn't close all the way and squeezed against the far wall, an old upright piano that had seen better days. The piano took up way too much space in the cramped room, but Rita would rather give up her bed than that instrument. She dragged herself up and started getting ready for another day at the diner. The uniform was the same pale blue dress she'd worn for 3 years now, with Rosie's Diner stitched across the pocket in fading red thread. Her feet already hurt just thinking about the 12-hour shift ahead. At 32 years old, this wasn't where Rita thought she'd be. But life had a funny way of changing your plans whether you liked it or not. The diner sat on a busy corner downtown, the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee at 4 in the morning and office workers grabbed lunch in a hurry. Rita had worked there so long she could pour coffee while half asleep and still not spill a drop. Her hands moved on autopilot, refilling mugs, delivering plates of eggs and toast, wiping down the counter for the 100th time. Most people didn't really see her. She was just the waitress, part of the background like the worn vinyl booths or the flickering neon sign in the window. They didn't know that those same hands carrying their breakfast plates could play Rachmaninoff without missing a note. They didn't know that the tired woman refilling their coffee had once performed for an audience of 500 people. That felt like a lifetime ago now. Rita had been 19 when she got the letter. A full scholarship to the Westfield Conservatory, one of the best music schools in the country. She'd cried in her mother's arms, both of them knowing this was the chance they'd prayed for. Her parents had immigrated from the Philippines with nothing but hope and determination, working 3 jobs between them so Rita could take piano lessons at the community center. The conservatory had been everything she'd dreamed of. Practice rooms with perfect acoustics, grand pianos that responded to the lightest touch, professors who had performed all over the world. For 2.5 years, Rita lived and breathed music. She was going to be a concert pianist. Everyone said so. Then her mother got sick. The cancer came fast and mean. The medical bills piled up faster than her father could work. Rita tried to balance everything: classes during the day, hospital visits at night, picking up weekend shifts at a coffee shop to help with expenses. But it wasn't enough. Something had to give. She remembered the day she walked into the dean's office to withdraw. He'd tried to talk her out of it, said she had real talent, that opportunities like this didn't come twice. But what was she supposed to do? Let her mother die while she practiced scales? Her mother passed away 6 months after Rita left school. By then, Rita had already started working at the diner full-time. She kept telling herself it was temporary, just until she got back on her feet. She'd reapply to the conservatory, finish her degree, pick up where she left off. But the music world didn't work that way. She'd missed her moment. The professors stopped returning her emails. When she finally saved enough money to enter a competition 2 years later, the judges barely looked at her resume. "We're looking for emerging artists," one of them had said, not even trying to hide the dismissal in his voice. At 25, she was already too old, too unknown, too ordinary. So she kept working at the diner. The tips were decent, the work was steady, and it paid the rent. Her father had moved back to the Philippines to be near family, and Rita was alone in the city. Just her and that beat-up piano in her too small apartment. The regulars at the diner had no idea about any of this. To them, she was just Rita who remembered they liked their eggs over easy, who knew Jim took 3 sugars in his coffee, who always had a smile even when her feet were killing her. Sometimes she hummed while she worked, old melodies from pieces she used to play. A few customers commented on it, said she had a nice voice. She'd just smile and bring them more coffee. Her co-workers were nice enough mostly. They joked around during slow periods, complained about difficult customers, talked about their kids and their plans for the weekend. When they asked about her life, Rita kept it simple. No, she wasn't married. No kids, nothing much going on. They didn't need to know about the other life she lived after midnight, because that's when Rita really came alive. After the last customer left and the diner closed at 11, Rita would walk the 6 blocks home, climb the 3 flights of stairs, and finally sit down at her piano. The neighbors below her had complained more than once. The guy next door banged on the wall sometimes. The landlord had warned her about the noise. But Rita couldn't stop. Music wasn't just something she did. It was who she was. She'd play for hours, her fingers working through complicated pieces she'd learned years ago, making sure she didn't forget. But more than that, she composed. She wrote her own music, pouring everything she couldn't say into the notes. All the disappointment, the exhaustion, the dreams that felt further away every day. It all went into the piano. There was one piece in particular she'd been working on for years. She called it Reflections of Tomorrow in her head, though she'd never told anyone about it. The melody had come to her one night after a particularly brutal shift, when a customer had yelled at her for bringing the wrong order, and her manager had backed him up instead of her. She'd gone home and the music just poured out. The piece was complicated, weaving together the lullabies her mother used to sing, the sounds of the city outside her window, and something else she couldn't quite name, hope maybe, or the memory of hope. It was the kind of music that required real skill to play. The technical precision she'd learned at the conservatory combined with genuine emotion. It was probably the best thing she'd ever written, not that anyone would ever hear it. Rita had accepted that music was just for her now. Something private, a secret life she lived in the hours between shifts. She'd made peace with it, or at least that's what she told herself. She didn't know that everything was about to change, that in just 2 weeks a chance encounter would crack open the door she thought had closed forever, that the life she'd resigned herself to was just the beginning of a story, not the end. But on this particular morning, as she tied her apron and prepared for another day of coffee and eggs and customers who looked right through her, Rita had no idea. She was just a waitress with calloused hands and a hidden talent, trying to make it through another day. The first customer of the morning pushed through the door, bell chiming overhead. Rita grabbed a menu and smiled the smile she'd perfected over 3 years of service. "Good morning. Can I start you off with some coffee?" The rain started around 7 that Tuesday evening, the kind of heavy downpour that sent people running for cover and left the streets smelling like wet concrete. Rita watched through the diner's streaky windows as umbrellas popped open like mushrooms and taxis splashed through puddles. The dinner rush had been steady but not crazy. Her feet hurt less than usual, which was something to be grateful for. She was wiping down table 6 when the bell above the door chimed and a woman walked in, shaking water from an expensive-looking coat. Rita noticed her immediately, not because of the designer clothes or the leather briefcase, but because of the look on her face. Pure irritation. The kind of anger that came from somewhere deeper than just getting caught in the rain. "Sit anywhere you'd like," Rita called out, grabbing a menu. The woman chose a booth by the window and barely glanced up when Rita approached. She was maybe in her 50s, with sharp features and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Everything about her screamed money and authority. "Just coffee. Black. Strong," the woman said, already pulling out her phone. Rita brought the coffee and started to walk away, but the woman's phone rang before she could take 2 steps. The conversation that followed was loud enough that half the diner could hear it. "The whole thing was a disaster, Michael. Absolutely mediocre." The woman's voice cut through the quiet dinner atmosphere. 20 years studying piano, and the man plays like he's working at a car wash. No feeling, no soul. Just technical exercises dressed up as art. Rita felt her jaw tighten. She kept wiping down the counter, but she was listening. "I'm telling you, true artistry is dead," the woman continued. "These performers today, they have the training but none of the heart. It's all for show, all surface. Nobody understands what it means to actually feel the music anymore." Rita's hands gripped the dish rag tighter. Easy to criticize, she thought, when you're sitting in the audience instead of on stage. Easy to talk about feeling and soul when you don't know what it costs to keep playing when the world tells you to stop. The woman stayed for almost an hour, working on her laptop between phone calls and complaints. Rita refilled her coffee 3 times without saying a word. Finally, the rain let up a bit, and the woman packed up her things, leaving a 20 on the table for a $6 tab. Rita cleared the booth and was wiping it down when she spotted the leather portfolio left behind on the seat. It was clearly expensive, the kind of thing that probably cost more than Rita made in a week. She grabbed it and rushed outside, the evening air still heavy with moisture. "Ma'am, excuse me." The woman was halfway down the block, moving fast despite her heels. Rita ran after her, dodging puddles. "Ma'am, you forgot this." The woman turned, eyes widening when she saw the portfolio. She hurried back, taking it from Rita's hands with a look of genuine relief. "Oh my God, thank you. My entire week is in here." She clutched it to her chest, then seemed to really see Rita for the first time. "That was incredibly honest of you. Most people would have just—" She trailed off, but Rita knew what she meant. Most people would have kept it, or at least looked inside to see if there was anything valuable. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a business card along with 3 $20 bills. "Please take this, and if you ever need anything at all, call me." Rita glanced at the card. Victoria Brennan, senior music critic, Metropolitan Times. Her stomach did a little flip. She'd read this woman's reviews before, back when she used to follow the classical music scene religiously. Victoria Brennan could make or break careers with a single article. She was known for being brilliant and absolutely ruthless. "That's really not necessary," Rita said, trying to hand back the money. "I insist. Honesty like that is rare." Victoria gave her a genuine smile, so different from the irritated woman who'd walked into the diner. "What's your name?" "Rita." "Well, Rita, thank you again, really." Victoria tucked the portfolio under her arm and disappeared into the evening crowd. Back inside the diner, Rita slipped the money and business card into her apron pocket. $60 was $60, and the electric bill was due. But it was the card that kept drawing her attention throughout the rest of her shift. Victoria Brennan. The woman who'd just been complaining about mediocre pianists and dead artistry. 2 weeks passed. The business card stayed in Rita's wallet, and she'd pretty much forgotten about the encounter. She was in the break room during her 15-minute lunch when one of the other waitresses, Paula, came in waving a bright yellow flyer. "Hey, you play piano, right?" Paula asked, pinning the flyer to the bulletin board among the work schedules and health inspection notices. Rita looked up from her sandwich. "What? I've heard you humming. You know music stuff, don't you?" Paula tapped the flyer. "My daughter's music teacher had these. Thought you might be interested." After Paula left, Rita stood up to look at the flyer. Her heart started beating faster as she read it. Annual City Piano Competition. Grand Prize, solo recital at Metropolitan Concert Hall, professional recording contract, and $10,000. Open to all skill levels. Performers must submit an original composition. Deadline? 3 weeks from today. Rita's hands were shaking as she pulled the flyer down to read the details. The competition was open to anyone, regardless of age or background. But there was a catch. You had to perform something you'd written, yourself, and it had to be at least 15 minutes long. Then she saw the list of judges. Right there, third name down, Victoria Brennan. Rita folded the flyer and shoved it in her pocket. This was crazy. She hadn't performed in front of people in years. She had no connections, no recent credentials, nothing but a beat-up piano in a studio apartment and a piece of music she'd been working on in secret. But that piece, Reflections of Tomorrow, it was good. She knew it was good. It was personal and complicated and exactly the kind of music Victoria Brennan had complained was missing from modern performance. Music with soul. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Rita's mind was racing through possibilities and obstacles. The competition was on a Saturday, so she wouldn't have to miss work. The entry fee was only $25. She still had Victoria's money. She could use that. But could she really do this? Walk into that concert hall with all those properly trained musicians, probably fresh out of prestigious schools with their expensive clothes and family connections? Could she stand on that stage as just a waitress with a dream that refused to die? When she got home that night, Rita sat at her piano and played through Reflections of Tomorrow from start to finish. Her fingers knew every note, every subtle change in tempo, every moment where the melody broke and reformed into something new. This piece held everything she couldn't say out loud. The grief of losing her mother, the frustration of working jobs that didn't feed her soul, the stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The neighbors banged on the wall around midnight. Rita kept playing. By 2 in the morning, she'd made her decision. She pulled out the crumpled flyer and smoothed it flat on her kitchen counter. 3 weeks to polish her performance, to memorize every detail, to prepare for the moment that might change everything or confirm that she'd been fooling herself all along. She looked at Victoria Brennan's business card, still tucked in her wallet. The woman had said to call if she needed anything, but Rita knew she wouldn't. This wasn't about connections or favors. If she was going to do this, it had to be on her own terms, with her own talent. Rita filled out the competition entry form online at 2:47 in the morning. When she hit submit, her hands were steady. Whatever happened, at least she would know. At least she would have tried one more time. She had no idea that this decision would change everything. That in 3 weeks she'd walk onto a stage and prove that Victoria Brennan was wrong about one thing. True artistry wasn't dead. Sometimes it was just waiting tables, biding its time, waiting for one last chance to be heard. Rita walked into her manager's office the next morning with her request written on a piece of notebook paper. Her hands were sweating, but her voice stayed steady. "I need Saturday the 15th off. It's important." Frank looked up from his desk, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s who'd managed the diner for 20 years and didn't like change. "Can't do it. Saturday's our busiest day. You know that. I've never asked for a Saturday off before, not once in 3 years." Frank shook his head, already looking back down at his paperwork. "Request denied. If you don't show up, don't bother coming back." Rita stood there for a moment, the words hitting her like cold water. She needed this job. She needed the money for rent, for food, for everything. But she also needed to do this. Competition. Needed it in a way that went deeper than money or security. "Okay," she said quietly and left his office. She'd figure something out. She had to. The next 3 weeks became a blur of exhaustion that made her previous life look easy. Rita kept working her regular 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Then, she'd go home and practice until 3 or 4 in the morning, surviving on coffee and sheer determination. Reflections of Tomorrow needed work. Not the composition itself, that was solid, but her performance of it. She'd been playing it alone for so long that she'd gotten comfortable, a little sloppy. Competition performance was different. Every note had to be perfect. Every dynamic shift had to be intentional. The judges would notice every tiny mistake. Her fingers started developing new calluses on top of the old ones. At work, carrying plates became painful. The hot coffee pot felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Paula noticed her wincing and offered to take some of her tables, but Rita refused. She couldn't afford to lose any tips. The other waitresses started whispering. During breaks, Rita caught fragments of their conversations. "She looks terrible. You think she's sick? Maybe drugs. My cousin looked like that when she was using." Rita didn't have the energy to care what they thought. Every spare moment she had, she was thinking about the music. When she poured coffee, she was mentally rehearsing the difficult passage in the third movement. When she took orders, she was hearing the melody in her head. The neighbors complained more frequently now. The landlord, Mr. Peterson, caught her in the hallway one evening. "Rita, I've had 3 complaints this week alone. It's after midnight. People have jobs in the morning. I know, I'm sorry, just a couple more weeks." "A couple more weeks of what?" "Look, I like you, but if this keeps up, I'll have to do something about it." She knew what that meant. Eviction. One more thing to worry about. But she kept practicing. Her body started breaking down in small ways. She'd wake up and her hands would be so stiff she could barely make a fist. Her back ached from hunching over the piano keys for hours. She developed a twitch in her left eye from lack of sleep. More than once she dozed off on the bus home from work and missed her stop. The worst part was that nobody knew. Nobody understood what she was working toward. To everyone at the diner, she was just Rita, who looked like death warmed over. To her neighbors, she was the inconsiderate woman keeping them awake. To the landlord, she was becoming a problem. She had no one to talk to about the competition, no one to encourage her or tell her she was doing the right thing. Some nights, sitting at her piano at 2 in the morning with her fingers cramping and her eyes burning, she wondered if she was crazy. Maybe Frank was right. Maybe this was stupid. Maybe she should just accept that some dreams weren't meant to come true. Then she'd play through the opening of reflections of tomorrow, and something would shift inside her. This piece was good. It meant something. It deserved to be heard. 2 weeks before the competition, disaster struck. She was carrying a tray of dishes during the lunch rush when her exhaustion finally caught up with her. One moment she was walking, the next her knees just gave out. The tray crashed to the floor, plates shattering everywhere. The diner went silent. Customers stared. Frank came rushing out from the kitchen. "What the hell, Rita?" She knelt on the floor, picking up broken pieces of plate, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You look like you're about to pass out. When's the last time you slept?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're a mess. Whatever's going on with you, you need to get it together or find another job." She spent her break, sitting in the bathroom, head in her hands, trying not to cry. She was so tired. Everything hurt. And Frank was right. She was a mess. But she couldn't stop now. Not when she was this close. 1 week before the competition, Rita's worst fear almost came true. She was practicing late at night when she hit a wrong note in a section she'd played perfectly 100 times before. She tried again. Wrong note. Again. Wrong note. Panic flooded through her. Her fingers weren't responding right. They were too tired, too overworked. She tried to play a simple scale and stumbled over it. She sat at the piano, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. What if this was it? What if she'd pushed too hard and broken something in herself that couldn't be fixed? What if she got up on that stage and her hands just stopped working? Rita didn't play at all that night. She sat on her bed and cried, really cried. For the first time since her mother died, all the exhaustion and fear and loneliness came pouring out. The next morning, her hands felt a little better. She gave them a complete rest that day, didn't even hum at work. That night, she played through the piece once, slowly and carefully. Her fingers responded. It wasn't perfect, but it was there. She learned something important. Her body needed rest too. For the last week before the competition, she cut back on her practice time. Just 2 hours a night instead of 5 or 6. She forced herself to sleep. She ate actual meals instead of just coffee and whatever leftovers she could grab from the diner. By the time Friday rolled around, the day before the competition, Rita was as ready as she'd ever be. She knew reflections of tomorrow, inside and out. She could play it in her sleep, which was good because she'd basically been doing that for weeks. Her last shift before the competition was brutal. Friday night rush, every table full, Frank riding everyone harder than usual. A businessman at table 12 sent his steak back twice and then refused to tip. A woman spilled coffee all over herself and blamed Rita, demanding her meal be comped. At 10:30, just as things were finally slowing down, one of the regulars walked out without paying. $200 for a group dinner, just gone. Frank came out of his office holding the bill. "This is coming out of your paycheck." Rita stared at him. "What?" "I can't control if someone walks out. You were their server. Your responsibility." He shoved the bill at her. "Maybe if you weren't sleepwalking through your shifts, you would have noticed." $200, that was almost her entire paycheck for the week. That was her electricity bill, her groceries, the money she needed for the bus pass. She took the bill without saying anything. What could she say? She needed this job. After the competition tomorrow, win or lose, she'd still need this job. Rita walked home in the rain, too tired to care that she was getting soaked. The business card Victoria Brennan had given her was in her wallet, along with the competition entry confirmation. Tomorrow she'd walk into that concert hall and play her heart out. But tonight she was just a broke, exhausted waitress wondering if any of this was worth it. Rita stood outside the Metropolitan Concert Hall at 9 in the morning, holding her sheet music in a plastic grocery bag. The building was massive, all marble columns and brass doors that probably cost more than her yearly salary. She'd walked past it 1,000 times on her way to work, but never imagined she'd actually go inside. Other contestants were arriving in town cars and taxis. They carried professional leather folders and wore clothes that screamed money and training. One girl who couldn't have been more than 20 stepped out of a Mercedes, her parents following behind with a bouquet of flowers already prepared. Rita looked down at her outfit. She'd borrowed a black dress from Paula at the diner, the one Paula wore to funerals. It was a little too big and smelled faintly of mothballs. Her shoes were her church shoes from 5 years ago, scuffed at the toes. The grocery bag crinkled in her hands. She almost turned around and went home right there, but her feet kept moving forward. Through those brass doors into a lobby with chandeliers and polished floors that reflected her worn-out shoes. A woman at a registration table checked her name off a list without really looking at her. Contestant 15, you're in the second half. Wait in the green room until you're called. The green room was packed with nervous energy. About 20 pianists sat around on chairs and couches, some practicing fingering patterns in the air, others listening to music through headphones. Rita found a seat in the corner and tried to make herself invisible. 2 guys near her were talking, their voices carrying across the room. Did you see who's judging? Victoria Brennan is on the panel. My teacher says she's impossible to impress. I know, right? She gave that concert last month 2 stars. 2 stars! And that was the Philharmonic. Apparently she walked out of a performance once, just stood up and left in the middle. Rita's stomach twisted. She pulled out her sheet music and tried to focus, but her hands were shaking. A few seats over, 2 women were talking about a contestant who'd already performed in the first session. Did you hear about number 7? Completely fell apart in the 3rd movement. Just stopped playing. Oh God, that's my nightmare. The judges didn't even wait for her to finish. They were already writing notes. Rita closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her mother, about the diner, about every single 3 a.m. practice session. She thought about reflections of tomorrow and what it meant to her. Hey, you okay? Rita opened her eyes. A young guy, maybe 25, was looking at her with concern. Yeah, just nervous. First competition? In a long time, yeah, he smiled. Me too. Well, good luck to us both. The morning dragged on. One by one, contestants were called. Some came back looking relieved. Others looked like they might cry. Around noon, they broke for lunch. Rita couldn't eat. Her stomach was in knots. She went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face looked pale, tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She didn't look like a concert pianist. She looked like exactly what she was, a waitress who was way out of her depth. Back in the green room, she overheard 2 women talking near the coffee table. Who's left to perform? Not many. There's that kid from Juilliard, the one who won the youth competition last year, and some woman, I don't know her name. Probably nobody important. Did you see her carrying a grocery bag? I mean, really, they laughed. Rita's face burned hot, but she kept her eyes on her sheet music. She'd heard worse at the diner. People could be cruel without even trying. Number 15, Rita Delgado. You're up? Her heart jumped into her throat. This was it. She stood up, her legs feeling like water, and followed a stagehand down a long hallway. With each step, she could hear the muffled sound of the piano in the concert hall, someone finishing their performance. The stagehand stopped at a side door. Wait here until you hear applause. Then go straight to the piano. Introduce yourself and your piece, then begin whenever you're ready. Rita nodded, not trusting her voice. Through the door, she heard the final notes of someone's performance. Applause followed, polite and brief. The audience went quiet. This was it. She pushed through the door and walked onto the stage. The lights were brighter than she'd expected. The piano sat in the center, a beautiful grand piano that probably cost more than her apartment building. Beyond the lights, she could barely see the audience. Maybe 200 people sitting in darkness. In the front row, the judges sat at a long table. Victoria Brennan was right in the middle. Rita walked to the piano on legs that didn't feel like her own. She could hear her shoes clicking on the stage floor, way too loud in the silent hall. Someone in the audience coughed. She reached the piano and turned to face the judges. Victoria was looking down at something, a clipboard or maybe a phone. She hadn't even looked up yet. Rita cleared her throat. Good afternoon. My name is Rita Delgado, and I'll be performing an original composition titled Reflections of Tomorrow. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Victoria's head snapped up at the sound, and Rita watched recognition flash across her face. The music critic's eyes widened slightly. She leaned over to whisper something to the judge next to her, a man with white hair and an expensive suit. He glanced at Rita and smirked. Rita saw it all. She understood what they were thinking. The waitress. The woman with the grocery bag. The one who probably didn't belong here. Something hardened inside her chest. She sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. The keys were perfect, smooth and responsive under her fingers. She took one deep breath, held it and let it out slowly. Then she began to play. The opening was soft, almost a whisper. Single notes that hung in the air like questions waiting to be answered. Rita let each note breathe, patient and deliberate. This was the sound of hope struggling to exist in darkness, the melody she'd written on one of her worst days at the diner. Her fingers moved across the keys, and suddenly the melody began to build. The left hand came in with a steady rhythm like a heartbeat, while the right hand wove a pattern that was part sadness, part determination. This was the sound of her mother's lullabies mixed with the noise of the city at night. Rita forgot about the judges. She forgot about Victoria Brennan's smirk and the whispers in the green room, and the fact that her dress was borrowed. She forgot everything except the music. The first movement flowed into the second, tempo increasing. Her hands flew across the keys now, playing the complicated passage she'd practiced 1,000 times. The passage that represented struggle, every dish she'd washed and every customer who'd looked through her like she was invisible. In the audience, someone shifted forward in their seat. The music shifted again, darker now, more complex. Jazz harmonies crept into the classical structure, unexpected and bold. This was the risk part, the section where she'd broken the traditional rules because the rules didn't fit what she needed to say. Rita's whole body was involved now, leaning into the phrases, pulling back when the melody required softness. Sweat formed on her forehead, but she didn't notice. Her fingers knew every note, every subtle change, every moment where the music needed to breathe. At the judges' table, Victoria Brennan had stopped taking notes. Her pen hung frozen in the air, her eyes fixed on Rita with an expression that was impossible to read. The third movement began, the section Rita loved most. This was where all the earlier themes came back together, transformed. The sadness was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. Not hope exactly, but refusal. The refusal to give up, to stop believing, to let the world decide what she was worth. The melody soared, filled the entire concert hall. This was everything she'd wanted to say but couldn't find words for. This was her mother's love and her father's sacrifice and her own stubborn heart that kept beating even when it hurt. The final passage approached. Rita's hands moved with absolute certainty now. She'd played this ending so many times in her cramped apartment that her fingers could find the notes blindfolded. But this time was different. This time people were listening. The last chord rang out, rich and full, hanging in the air for a long moment before fading into silence. Rita's hands lifted from the keys. She sat perfectly still, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The silence stretched out. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then someone in the audience started clapping. The single clap became 2, then 5, then suddenly the entire audience was on their feet. The sound rolled over Rita like a wave, overwhelming and impossible to process. People were standing, actually standing, applauding so loudly it echoed off the concert hall walls. Rita sat frozen at the piano, her hands still trembling above the keys. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She managed to stand, her legs shaky, and took a small bow. The applause continued. Someone in the balcony whistled. In the front row, she could see Victoria Brennan standing with the other judges, clapping with her hands raised high. There were tears on the music critic's face. Rita walked off stage in a daze. The stagehand who'd shown her in was grinning. That was incredible. I've been working these competitions for 5 years and I've never heard anything like that. Thank you, Rita whispered, not quite believing any of it. Back in the green room, the atmosphere had completely changed. Contestants who'd ignored her before were suddenly looking at her with something like respect or maybe fear. The 2 women who'd laughed about her grocery bag were very quiet. The young guy who'd wished her luck earlier came over, shaking his head in amazement. You just won. You know that, right? Nobody else even came close. Rita sat down, her whole body starting to shake now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Whatever happened next, she'd proven something to herself. 20 minutes later, an announcement came over the intercom asking all contestants to return to the concert hall for the results. Rita filed in with the others, taking a seat near the back. Her heart was still racing. The head judge, the white-haired man who'd smirked at her earlier, stood at the podium. His expression was very different now. This year's competition showcased remarkable talent, he began. Our judges had a difficult decision to make. He talked for a few more minutes about the importance of music and supporting young artists. Rita barely heard any of it. Her mind kept replaying her performance, wondering if she'd imagined how well it went. Third place goes to contestant number 8, David Chen. Applause. A young man walked up to accept his certificate. Second place goes to contestant number 12, Helen Rodriguez. More applause. A woman in an expensive dress accepted her award. Rita's hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her fingers hurt. And first place? Winning a solo recital, recording contract, and $10,000 goes to contestant number 15, Rita Delgado. The world tilted sideways. Rita stood up without remembering how to walk, somehow making it to the stage on autopilot. The head judge shook her hand, pressing an envelope and a certificate into her palm. The audience was applauding again, but it sounded far away, like she was underwater. Congratulations, the judge said, and this time his smile was genuine. That was extraordinary. The next hour was a blur of handshakes and congratulations. Other contestants came up to her, some offering genuine praise, others clearly bitter but trying to hide it. Competition organizers explained next steps for the recording contract and concert booking. Then Victoria Brennan appeared in front of her. The music critic's makeup was slightly smudged from crying. She looked at Rita with an expression that was hard to read, something between admiration and shame. Rita? I didn't recognize you at first. Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. That performance. I've been reviewing concerts for 23 years, and what you did up there. She shook her head, searching for words. That's what music is supposed to be, real, honest, from somewhere true. Rita didn't know what to say. This was the woman who'd sat in her diner complaining about mediocre artists, not knowing one was refilling her coffee. I'm sorry, Victoria continued. When I saw you walk on stage, when I realized you were my waitress from that diner, I'm ashamed to say I judged you before you played a single note. I saw your dress, your shoes, that grocery bag, and I assumed, she paused. I assumed wrong. About everything. It's okay, Rita said quietly. It's not okay. I built my career on recognizing talent, and I almost dismissed genius because it came wrapped in the wrong packaging. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'd like to write about you. About your story. Would that be all right? Rita thought about Frank at the diner, about the neighbors who complained, about everyone who'd looked through her like she was invisible. Then she thought about all the other people out there like her with talent and dreams but no easy path forward. Yes, I'd like that. Victoria's article came out 3 days later. The Waitress Who Reminded Me Why Music Matters ran on the front page of the Metropolitan Times Arts section. It told Rita's whole story. The conservatory scholarship, dropping out to care for her sick mother, the years of working at the diner while secretly composing, the 3 weeks of brutal preparation for the competition. But more than that, Victoria wrote about her own failure. She admitted to her assumptions, her snobbery, her moment of judgment when she saw Rita walk on stage. She wrote about how Rita's performance had made her cry for the first time in a decade of attending concerts. She called Reflections of Tomorrow a masterpiece, and Rita one of the most important composers of her generation. The article went viral within hours. By the end of the week, Rita's phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets wanted interviews. Classical music stations wanted to play recordings of her competition performance. A major record label called offering a 3-album deal. The conservatory she'd dropped out of called to invite her back, not as a student but as a guest lecturer. Rita's solo recital at the Metropolitan Concert Hall sold out in 40 minutes. People lined up around the block hoping for returned tickets. The performance was streamed online and watched by over 2 million people. But the moment that meant the most came 2 weeks after the competition. Rita walked into the diner, not in her uniform but in regular clothes. Frank looked up from the register, his expression complicated. I saw the article. Saw the videos of your performance going around online? Yeah, Rita said. Listen, I wanted to thank you, actually. All those shifts, the tough days, they taught me things the conservatory never could. They made me stronger. Frank nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't give you that Saturday off. Should have trusted you. It's okay. Everything worked out the way it needed to. Paula and the other waitresses came out from the kitchen, clustering around to congratulate her. They wanted to hear everything, wanted to know what famous people were like, whether she was going to be rich now. Rita spent an hour there, treating everyone to lunch from the prize money she'd won. These were her people, the ones who'd known her when she was nobody special. She wouldn't forget that. 6 months later, Rita's debut album, Reflections of Tomorrow, was released to critical acclaim. It went to #1 on the classical charts and crossed over to mainstream success in a way few classical recordings ever did. She performed at Carnegie Hall, at the Hollywood Bowl, at venues she'd only dreamed about. But the project she was most proud of was the scholarship fund she established. The Second Chance Music Scholarship was specifically designed for adult students who'd had to abandon their musical education due to financial hardship. No age limits, no questions about gap years or unconventional backgrounds, just an audition and an essay about why they deserved another shot. The first year she funded 10 full scholarships. One recipient was a 38-year-old truck driver who'd taught himself piano during rest stops. Another was a 42-year-old mother of 3 who'd given up a promising opera career to raise her kids. Rita met with each scholarship recipient personally. She told them her story about working at the diner and practicing until her hands bled and almost giving up 100 times. She told them that talent doesn't have an expiration date, that dreams don't die just because life gets hard. A year after her competition win, Victoria Brennan wrote a follow-up article. It wasn't just about Rita anymore, but about the dozens of second-chance musicians her scholarship had helped. It was about changing the conversation around who deserves to be heard. Rita still had the plastic grocery bag she'd carried her sheet music in. She kept it in her studio as a reminder of where she'd come from. Sometimes students or journalists would ask why she kept it, and she'd tell them the truth. Because I need to remember that how you arrive doesn't matter. What matters is what you do once you get there. Late at night, when the concerts and interviews and recording sessions were done, Rita would sit at her piano and play. Sometimes she played Reflections of Tomorrow, the piece that had changed her life. But more often she worked on new compositions, new stories told in music. She'd learned something important through everything that happened. Her voice mattered. Not because someone with a fancy title said so, not because she won a competition, but because her music came from somewhere true. That truth had always been there, in the diner at midnight, in her tiny apartment, in every moment when she chose to keep playing even when no one was listening. And now people were listening. Not just to her, but to all the voices that had been dismissed, overlooked, or silenced by circumstance. Rita had opened a door, and she planned to hold it open for as many people as she could. The Waitress had become a maestro. But more importantly, she'd reminded the world that genius does.